Thank you. I like how I set it up to come back correctly and then the audio fails at that exact moment. So, again to remind you, if you weren't here a second ago, we're about to relax all spoiler restrictions. We can talk about the whole show. So if you were sensitive to spoilers, if this is a problem for you right now, please remember to bail out, or at least mute us or something. So, anyone else enjoying the retro anime put on film stock with all the grain? Yeah, it's a little bit of a pain for making little transitions and other elements, though, to clean up. It does have a certain amount of personality to it. At this stage, in the sense that it stops some of those clean lines. It works great for the backgrounds, right? Where they're trying to give them a little more character, a little less artificial look. But they have to struggle against it, I think, in the design of the Avas. I think that's probably part of the reason they're so bright, is it helps them actually make them look like clean lines. Because it's usually the shadows that show the grain so much. Which is why people still like film stock for black and white photography. It gives so much character to the shadows. So, yeah. So, this very last episode we just talked about, as I said, it has ramifications, at least as far as what's talking about as far as nature versus artifice. So it was great that people are already debating that, or technology and all that. In the context of this whole series, that's really relevant, right? It's like, in fact, this topic's so big, I'm not sure where to begin. I don't know. What is? Oh, come on. What is a good example from a little later? So you're saying later episodes have cuts with more grain. Yeah, it's always going to be easier to work with less for the brighter scenes, but it's one more tool in their toolbox to be sure. Yeah, on if technology is better or not. Definition of better is subjective, and I think that's actually kind of a big thing to talk about in Evangelion in general, right? Like, these guys are eventually trying to make a better world the way they see it, and everyone else is caught up in that. And presumably that is why a lot of people who pursue science and technology for pure reasons do so. But I would say that things like the Instrumentality Project are pretty subjectively better, right? Obviously it seems better to some, and for different reasons, like breaking the bonds between humans and for that kind of immediacy, I know has appeal to some people, depending on how you want to interpret later things, which again, it's been a minute, about taking on a new evolution for humanity to be able to survive and go on and be better than they were. From that point of view, technology almost exists. You can always think of technology as the evolution we do to ourselves, that we advance naturally up to a certain point, but only at a certain rate. And technology and artificial things we create are how we continue to modify ourselves as humans, as civilizations. Both making things, yeah, artifice, that's the most obvious thing, technology, but also things like language, things like art, things like culture, things like believing in causes, believing in purposes, believing in the creation of nation states, and believing in currency, things that don't exist, not really, that we invented. or always we artificially try to continue that process. And what they are trying to do, some of them, is to go in for a much more wholesale evolution of humanity. And so I think you could debate whether that's better or not, almost with these same arguments that you debate whether technology is inherently better or worse, or should always advance. Right? I mean, like, yeah, no matter how much technology advance, humans stay the same. We emotionally and psychologically can't keep up with the pace of the things we create, the artificial things. And I mean, I think that has an echo in the Ava pilots, and it's more especially effective by using adolescents, because they are kind of immature and unfinished in the same way you might look at humans in general's ability to deal with the world they are creating. But we don't advance at the pace necessary to keep up with these changes. Now, there's a lot of like doomsaying about technology, a lot of like future visions of the future, like cyberpunk and other kind of the punks, where high-tech, low life. There's often this sentiment that technology steals some part of your humanity, that it increases isolation, makes us unnatural, and therefore disconnected or somehow lesser. But the truth is, I mean, truth, it's too broad a term. Lots of new technologies, when they come out, people wonder how people deal with this, how people adapt, how much crazier the world must be. But like, man, look around, right? There's people who were born before man took flight and lived to watch us land on the moon, and it didn't blow their mind. I mean, I'm sure it blew their mind, but like, it wasn't like their understanding of the world and ability to find their place in it collapsed. You know, it's just a, you know, it's a thing to make fun of old people and technology and struggling to understand it, but that actually has nothing to do with the technology, right? Because you see, if a kid grows up and never knows anything different, they adapt. That's their normal. So humans are extremely adaptable. But I do still agree that because technology builds off other technologies, that each person doesn't have to individually reinvent every single step before, it means we can always push further than we've had time to get used to. That happens even on the scale of culture. Things happen before we're maybe really ready to adapt to them. And so, yeah, it's very fitting that it's immature characters. I guess that was the point I was trying to go to, is that we have adolescents put in a position at first just to risk their lives, but then later to actually be the ones in a position to make a judgment call about all of the rest of the future of humanity, perhaps underscores that however smart we might think we are, and however adult and whatever, we're similarly ill-equipped to decide the fate of all humanity, or pretend that we have the answers, right? I mean, there's a lot of treating humanity as a character in Evangelion, if that makes sense, thinking of us as a single thing, and especially later when humanity is kind of expanded to also kind of include the Avas and angels, you know what I'm saying? That makes a much more interesting conversation, actually. Can't wait to get to the end, because I can't remember enough details to make that point very well. Yeah, so we've talked about the nuclear part of things. I mean, that's a good example. That's a good example of not just the hand that takes and the hand that gives, but also the way different cultures have differing levels of comfort with that, right? Different countries that are otherwise similar are either very pro-nuclear or very anti-nuclear, or are other countries have said they can't be nuclear, or they have agreed to that, depending on your perspective there. You would think the technology itself is morally agnostic, right? That it exists, doesn't matter. Like whether you apply morality to it or whether you make a decision based on that is down to the humans involved in applying the technology. But nuclear is a good example of something that is contentious for a lot of reasons. And are the advancements worth the trade-offs? There's no universal consensus on that. It can both power a nation and level one. It can create better life and energy and all the things that come with that in our society for a segment of people, but the cost of sometimes generating dangerous materials that will last long beyond the lives of the people who actually reaped that benefit. So nuclear stuff all by itself makes a great set of metaphors, right? Like there's a good reason so many, even though nuclear tech is old tech at this point, there's a good reason so many sci-fi stories reach for that to be the thing they use, because packaged within that is so much of the minefield of trying to make ethical decisions around technology and the risk rewards and who benefits and who potentially is one holding the bag, right? Yeah, I mean, one of the really interesting things about this series is to find out that the humans are essentially the usurpers. That by sheer chance, the Lilith, or whatever it is he calls them, the Lilith humans are, in a sense, the dispossessors, the ones who kicked the angels out of the garden, if you want to use it that way. And so, which one of them, which race? I don't think that's the right term, but you know what I mean. Which race should naturally have been the ones who inherited Earth? Kind of puts another wrinkle on this whole little bit of nature versus artifice that gets introduced this time, especially. It definitely came up in the Jet Alone episode, but it's the first time where it's like, can't miss it, right? Yeah, nuclear energy in sci-fi is often about responsibility of actions. I agree. And yeah, you have to take nature into account in all these situations. The funny thing is, while you have the option to create a technology-free existence, you can't do that with nature. There's no such thing as a completely artificial thing. And if there is, it's a story that humans aren't in, right? And so the how you deal with the nature side of humans is always there. That's always present in the same way that death is in every story, because that's always a reality. Restart this. Yes, and you're right. Japan, in particular, has a very complicated relationship to nuclear. Just anything about nuclear. We talked about before being only ones who've actually had a strike against them, but that didn't stop them from building nuclear power plants. And they're still complicated, because now, especially with the Fukushima reactor disaster. Yeah, the fact that things still can go wrong is back in the public mindset to complicate things even further. Yeah, another good example. Germany switching theirs off in comparison to France, right next door, right? Um, totally, these are not actually vastly different cultures as far as like how they want to be as nations, how they want to behave, and yet the way they've embraced nuclear are quite different, right? Um, it also perhaps underscores that sometimes those kind of huge decisions are made off of little things. In the U.S. in particular, the 3 Mile Island disaster, colored a lot of perception about adopting more nuclear technology, and justified, not justified. Um, Now that we think about the cost of other options, maybe making that kind of decision over what, in the grand scheme, was a very small thing was not the path of wisdom, right? It's complicated, and I like that the series doesn't try to advance one over the other. Um, it doesn't try to say, obviously technology is bad, look what happens. That's a problem with a lot of there's a lot of sci-fi stories that set you up to consider a moral, ethical, philosophical situation. Um, Sci-fi is an excellent medium for this because it takes us out of our own sense of the world, our own familiarity, and therefore separates us from our inherent biases, and then puts us in a new place, lets us understand that new world, new characters, and have them face the same kind of philosophical issues that we were facing. Sorry. I'm actually recording videos, like every few minutes I actually do that because of how quickly they get out of hand. Um, oh yes, it is example of availability heuristic. Uh, Whatever examples are readily available seem more relevant or more prominent than they are if you look at it dispassionately. Uh, Maybe we are straying too much from Eva. I mean, so what we're doing here, and you're right, these are not specifically Evangelion topics. What we're doing here is we're taking the themes that they're introducing, the technology and the plus or minus, the hands that gives and takes, and we're internalizing what this story is talking about, and then trying to take that and apply it to our reality, our own real experience. And our relationship with nuclear technology in our world is one of those things. So I would say this is actually, well, we don't have to talk about nuclear tech. The fact that we go there so naturally is exactly what you get from storytelling. It's exactly the internalize the fictional story and its themes and lessons, and then turn around and think about how does this apply to me and my, not the theme of my life, but the kind of philosophical, moral, ethical decisions that I face. By having another set of characters who are not even real go through this, we can get a little bit of a third perspective on it, a little bit of an outsider look, a little more of a bird's eye consideration. I think that's one of the things sci-fi can do very well. But there's too many stories already know the point they want to make, so they bring something up and then only give you one answer as far as the way they tell the story. I think that's a little bit like the artist reaching too far in to say how to interpret their work. So, oh yeah, humanity and nature being much more resilient. Um, yeah, yeah, sorry. That time I actually killed the shortcut altogether like an idiot. Um, I'm missing what people were saying, sorry. You want to know what the building is? I'll be right back screen. All right. Can I put this up and keep my voice? I don't think I set up that way. Hold up. All right. I think now my voice will come across it also. Yeah. So there's actually a few of these little funny buildings on the surface, if I recall, and I don't think I can remember where they are in the clips, or I go search for one. Um, I don't know. I think my first instinct on this, not remembering where everything goes, um, is there a specific point? Yeah, there's two things. One was the expanding the what we're talking about now, the technology versus nature thing, and how that becomes more and more relevant as we go along. This building. As to this building, my first instinct, if unless someone knows better, um, that it is just one of those things that makes the world feel more lived in, by introducing things that must have some purpose and never explaining them. It makes the world feel bigger than it is. Um, it makes you know that there are stories we aren't seeing. For example, um, um, for example, lost the audio again. For example, I feel like everyone probably knows this example, so no spoilers here. But in the first Star Wars movie, I don't think I'll be spoiling this, right? One of the first things that happens, not first, but in the first third of the movie, there is a scene where they go to the Mos Eisley Cantina. Okay, Mos Eisley is this set up as this den of scum and villainy, and they walk into the bar, and there's like 30, 40 something different alien designs, all united by a desire to have a pint, and so. Um, but what you get from that scene one of the things Star Wars does very, very well in general, is that the meeting we actually see is just one of several dozen stories and meetings that are happening at the same time in just that one corner of the universe. And so you understand how big that universe is, how many stories are going on. And so I think look at things like that, like the buildings that are never explained but are different than what we expect, different than buildings that we've seen. That my assumption is that's all that is, to let us know that Nerve's a big deal. We only see the small group of people, we only see our heroes and the people immediately around them, but it's to make us remember how big the actual story is. Same thing with putting the deserted buildings under the water last time, episode 8, and constantly showing the abandoned apartment buildings and the empty school classrooms is to remind us that even though we're focusing on a very small group of people, that it is a small subset, that there is much bigger things going on in the world. So that is my actual, just off the top of my head, way I would think what's going on there. Yeah, the light gathering thing. I don't know. Maybe so. I mean, there is. We don't have an example of it, right? I don't think. Um, Not that there's anything wrong with trying to suss it out. I just mean, well, I'm not sure there's a definitive answer. I know that Evangelion has a lot of liner notes, what are basically uh, appendices, addendum, things that don't happen in story that have been put out in an official capacity that relate to the story. But me personally, I don't marginalia. Basically, I don't go in for that. If you're really into it, I'm cool with like it's cool to like if you want to find out more of the details and have those mysteries answered. But for me, if it's important enough to affect the story, it should be in the story. I know that creators want to think through all the details of a thing, and it doesn't make sense to slow the story down to include all of them. That's actually still a very valuable process because it helps you imagine your world as a fully realized thing that we're all only going to see a small part of. And so sharing that kind of information, definitely that's like bonus added. But for me, that doesn't matter to me to how I interpret the story. Like maybe later, maybe just for fun, maybe to find out the names of all those ships and aliens and Star Wars be another good example. That's a different level of fan interaction, I think, than story analysis, trying to figure out with just what's on stage, right? Um, kind of like it's kind of like caring about, well, it's using stage analogy, caring about the names of the characters rather than thinking them as the names of the actors and actresses actually playing it. And you can be very interested in them and like their work and want to know more about them. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it doesn't have much to do with the actual story on stage, right? So I tend to not go in for that. So there's going to be a lot of information about Evangelion that is canon that I don't know. Um, oh yeah, but it's the thing with Gundo, Gundo, with Gundo implying that humans must have shut off the power, and that maybe this is to see how they restore things and get an inside look at how nerve operates. Um, don't come back up, right? So we're left with a question we mull over, and it refuses to answer even that, I think. Um, Gundam, yeah. So yes, it's the kind of thing that I would edit out if these were YouTube videos. I told you all you would see how much I benefit from the editing process. It's considerable. I couldn't answer it the other day because of the power going out the second time for me with the backup. Um, Somebody asked me that they would look through the website where I have some of the equipment up in the credits and noticed that I have a teleprompter, and they wanted to know why I made the decision to use a teleprompter. I don't know if you're in here, the person that asked that. I don't have it in front of me to look it up. I don't know if you're there or not. I'm sorry. But part of that is just because of this. When I'm doing things live like this, for whatever reason, my vocabulary just compresses down to the same 100 words, and I'll use the same expressions multiple times in the same sentence, and it's better to work that out in choice of words ahead of time. Um, am I sure it doesn't come back? Um, I can't. So I knew I wouldn't should be confident that at the moment in this episode, right? We don't know. Um, I I do think it is implied later that there has been some shenanigans with Seal being, and we start to find out that they and Gendo are not of one mind, right? I think you're right. I think it is implied that Seal has been running a counter operation in there. Um, and so, yeah, I agree. Seal's like, we were trying to think of this, like, wow, what happened? And it was Like, who could have done this? And honestly, that narrows the list of suspects considerably anyway, right? I mean, and from that point of view, it's actually kind of a bad mission, right? Like, the suspects aren't very, that list is not very long, right? Uh, Pronunciation hurt. What I don't remember what I said. I'm sorry. Yeah, so moving on from the technology thing. The other thing I wondered about that I couldn't bring up at the time, just this is me going back through it and wondering. Remember how Gendo was so abrupt with Shinji about talking about his future plans? Um, Considering what Gendo's actual goal is, uh, I understand why he would think it was pointless, right? Um, but do you think he kind of tips his hand there by being so insistent that it's a waste of time? Because in the moment you can interpret, kind of the way I was saying, that like this shows that he isn't thinking beyond the Ava program, doesn't care about the future of Shinji beyond that. I'm pronouncing seal. Oh, sorry. Uh, Discussion's running along. I know. I still wanted to have the. It's gonna be a short version, but I did want to have the discussion again. You just think he's a prick? This wasn't him tipping his hand. Yeah, I mean, I think we understand in retrospect why it seems like a waste of time to him. Um, and yeah, I mean, Shinji is. Um, Shinji's not the goal for him. His future, I agree, and he wants to reunite with Yui, his wife's name, Yui. Um, and so beyond that, things are immaterial. But he's also like the only living memory of her. Like he's the product of her. It's I think in defiance of what she would want for him to comport himself this way. And obviously this comes up again later in the series from where we are right now. So I don't remember how he phrased it because I haven't gotten like far again. But it's odd that the child they made together shouldn't inherit some of how he feels towards his wife, right? Like quite aside from um, his mourning state, quite aside from that being his a priority, he shouldn't have to choose one or the other. And so, is it hard for him to be close to something that reminds him of Yui, or is this a self-defense mechanism about getting close to someone else? I would think that, except for, I don't know. I can't remember if he ever actually. Uh, Gosh, I can't remember if he actually spelled this out. I'm sorry. Uh, yeah. So KC Supersonic. You sure we're getting Gendo's character is that he ultimately cares about existence with his wife over him existing as a human at all. Uh, that he would rather tear it all down if it meant he could be with her. Even if one of the things he tears down is his own sense of self. And if you take that as his motivation, then you could see where he wouldn't care so much about how others think of him, how he presents to others. Who cares about his reputation in light of that? Who cares about the impression he makes? Who cares about his son? Who cares about any of this aside from the goal? He'll care about if it advances his cause, like what he does with the Ritsuko and her mom. But I can understand where he wouldn't care as much about taking care of him if the goal was to be rid of it, right? I mean, in a way, you can think of him a bit as the way Rei thinks of herself at this point in the story. Well, I don't know, does Rei ever really feel different until the end? Let's not do the rebuild story spoilers here, though. In this case, spoilers just means the Netflix stuff. Yeah, no, let's not do the rebuilds. I told people that wouldn't be part of all this. Because they really are, if you don't know, the rebuilds start off like they're a retelling, but they don't stay that way. So there's definitely spoilerable material for you, even if you're very familiar with everything we're going to be talking about here. So yeah, by all means, whisper though. Yeah, that functionality is built right into Twitch. As long as everyone is consenting. Yes, I agree. It is hard to analyze Evangelion because there's so many small details. I think you see why I didn't think I would ever talk about Evangelion. Because to do it in the way I normally do series would be... Well, for one, I know what happens, so couldn't do it in the style I normally employ. But second of all, you almost have to go through everything twice. You almost have to go through more than twice by the end, 3 times by the time you include End of Evangelion. And so to catch everything, to be able to give everything its first watch context, end of 25-26 context, end of Evangelion context, would be quite the feat. That would be quite laborious. And so we're doing it this way, where I watch them anew, knowing what happens, but not remembering all the details, and picking a few things I want to talk about that I don't think will spoil people, but at least I'm trying to point out that attention was being paid. You'll probably notice that I try to linger on a couple of things that I know are foreshadowing things, but you could also extract that from that if it's the first time you saw it. Something I've tried to be careful to do. It's kind of a new challenge for me. Yeah, okay. I appreciate the vote of confidence, because that is what I wanted. I wanted a way to bring people together. And I just can't express to y'all how much I'm loving this. Like, how much this is what I wanted. I knew you guys would be great. I didn't tell you, I had someone, during one of these breaks, I had someone text me, one of the few people in the Alter Egos real life who knows I'm doing this, and she stopped into the stream a bit, and she texted me to, I can't remember what she said. Hold on, I'll be exact. Now I've gone way off the... So you really have like the sweetest supporters. You have some of the sweetest people in your channel. It's like I agree. This is a bunch I'm glad to have a conversation with. It's you get used to the idea that there's diminishing returns to having any kind of productive discussion on the internet, because anonymity does unfortunate things to people, and or not just anonymity. Actually, that's part of it. I think also the lack of consequences. Um, you would say things to people who can't reach you that you would never say to people who can. um, it's easy to talk tough when you are not within the range of someone's fist, but um, yeah, yeah, I really hope people are enjoying this. I love how much conversation there is. I love how I'll be going through my spiel and trying to talk about a few things and look over, and there's a whole other conversation going on. But why text is actually great for that is because text moves slowly enough and you compose your thoughts well enough that you can actually kind of do both at the same time. At least I hope you can. I know it's a little bit harder for people who aren't native English speakers to keep up with both. Um, but you can have a side conversation, right? And you can occasionally have what I'm saying spawn a new conversation, and that's what I wanted. That's what I was hoping for a while. It was live was gonna be something way down the line. By the way, I knew I wanted to do it. Someone convinced me Twitch was the right place to do it, but I want to finish everything else first because there's still gonna have the problem of how to integrate this with YouTube. But this is the reason that I was gonna find my way to this eventually. So. Um, yeah, yeah, it's still going. Yeah, sorry. Is anyone shocked? Is anyone surprised at all? I'm not. Um, I think the few people in my life that know I'm doing this are so relieved that I can yak at someone else for a change about storytelling. That like they've been granted a reprieve. Um, Supersonic, I agree. Like Ava is so, as a series, is so dense that it's a little bit intimidating. It might be the right word, but rather it's like the same reason I don't want to do it. It's like by the end, all I'll really realize is all the things I still didn't talk about, all the things I still didn't quite get to, and I appreciate the vote of confidence. I'm trying to. This might not be perfect, but I want to try to find a stage that has these conversations. It's been amazing to look through and see, wow, this is exactly the kind of stuff I always thought nice forums and stuff would be. That this, here's a point, and I disagree with, here's another point, and oh, that's a great point. And like, oh, this is relevant to this, and we're all kind of on the same page since we're going through it an episode at a time instead of talking about the whole thing. But I think it's part of what makes this part of it a little bit less coherent, is because given the opportunity to talk about the whole series, where do you begin? Yeah, I agree with you. I appreciate everyone taking it seriously and being sincere. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a subscriber only. So if you don't know, there's a couple of tools Twitch gives you to keep chat in line. They have their own moderation tools built in, and I'm only using one of them. And you also have two things where you can change who can chat. One is followers only mode, which I have queued up in case of emergency, and then there's also sub only mode, which is basically the two modes are in sub only mode you can only talk if you're a subscriber to that channel, and in followers only mode you can only talk if you have been a follower for a certain length of time, and the person whose channel it is can change what that is. So in an emergency, if you're being raided by a bunch of outsiders who want to disrupt chat, followers only mode will keep them from chatting, but the people who've actually been there all along will not be hit by that restriction, right? So I think that's a great tool. But some people leave follower-only mode on all the time, just hoping people will follow and boost their numbers just so they can say stuff. That's not the usage I want. But on very big channels, if they don't restrict chat in some way, chat becomes unusable. It just becomes a place where people spam emojis and memes and whatever they want. It's not this, right? So, yeah, even the best girl conversations have been non-toxic. That's good stuff. Uh, cost of the alter ego's effort for all this. I don't understand how like happier he is doing all this. So, um, and yeah, only a certain type of person has the patience to sit through 2-hour analysis videos. I agree. There's a lot of drive by people who are turned off and will never enter into this. It means there's a hard cap about how widespread it could ever be, too. Whatever, I'd rather have what I wanted to do. Yeah, it's definitely a problem. It's like a good problem to have, but one we definitely don't have to worry about. Maybe ever, but certainly not soon. Um, so, the Human Instrumentality Project was to be free from all things human, like from consequence to emotion. That's pretty much like a massive suicide. Um, it's definitely a suicide of ego. That's definitely like the point. Someone asked me before about the Freudian themes that show up in the chat all discussion I had after the thunderstorm, um, and that I do believe is a good way to look at how instrumentality, what it does. That the breaking of barriers between personalities also means getting rid of all the idiosyncrasies that make up the human experience. But in doing that, you are also destroying something perhaps essential about humanity, right? And I don't know. Um, I like that there's not a judgment call about it. That like characters themselves make decisions about that. I think it's naturally going to come up that we compare the Evangelion to Darling in the Franxx, largely because Darling in the Franxx is kind of what boosted my channel and the first time I got to do what I actually wanted to do. But also because it's the most recent example of something that is clearly inspired by Evangelion. And so it also has its own version of instrumentality. And that series actually kind of gives an answer to whether that was the right choice or not. Whereas Evangelion doesn't quite as much, right? And I'll eventually go back and find it because I want to credit it. But the person who pointed out to me in Darling the significance of the bad guys being purple and the individual relationships having either a blue or a red scheme. They did not, in fact, merge together to make purple. Was a great insight. That's one of those things, looking back, you realize how intentional it was. Then so built into that series is an answer to whether that's the right thing or not, whether instrumentality becoming a eusocial organism as humanity, or even it just advancing the degree to which we are. That series actually kind of does give an answer. It gives a different way humanity can be together, right? But rejects the instrumentality style. So same thing in that's a different series. I don't want to spoil it. It's a rare story where all the egos are separated, and everyone becomes one with each other, and the story's like, isn't that what we always wanted? The end. That's a pretty rare story. So we obviously are pretty attached to our individualities. The fact that we wouldn't want a story like that, yeah. Worried I'll kill over from lack of rest? No, I don't know. This is not going to help my case here, but when I'm doing the long form analysis week to week, there's one night a week, every week, that I just don't sleep, because that gives me another 8 hours. That gives me 8 work days in a week instead of 7, which is the only way it would ever get done. So, but this is my whole life. It's been this way. yes, I'm losing years off the end of my life, but I would have sleep problems anyway. I'm actually glad I can get something besides frustration out of that. So, the, yeah, I know I'm not go tech. That's how you want that said. I know I'm not helping my case here by sharing that with you. I don't want you to worry about it. I want you to know that I chose this, that this is what I wanted to do. Um, Even right now, I'm off work this week. I don't have paid vacation. I would rather work around it and do this the way I envisioned um, than wait until it's easy, wait until it's comfortable, wait until there's nothing given up, and I don't know. I've always asked a lot of my body. It's always delivered. So, um, yeah, whether something, choosing whether it's good or bad. I'm glad people like that I don't weigh in on whether I think something's objectively good or bad. For starters, I don't think such a thing exists, and it confuses me how wide the acceptance of that is. And maybe it's just because the alter ego's formal education involved me having to choose series or books mostly, and you analyze this, and we don't care if you like it or not. In fact, if I can tell if you like it or not from your analysis, you failed, right? And so maybe that's just we're so used to it being like movie reviewers and film critics and scores like that that are the first line of interpretation, the first line of someone commenting on it, that we just assume that's the way you do it. But I think that's such a surface level. You lose so much of the depth you can get out of a work. I mean, I don't know. I almost feel like it would be a fun challenge to take the lowest rated thing on Mal and analyze everything about it that's great, and then take the highest rated thing and take everything about it I think is crap, and just to see what the two things are. But even that actually just undermines my point, right? Um, Other than the fact that I probably could pull it off. It would probably be enough I could find either way to fill hours. Doesn't Shinji give the answer to the human instrumentality? So Shinji does for Shinji, and Shinji is audience surrogate, but we get to see how unformed he is and how insecure he is. This is why I feel like 2526 is still essential and is not supplanted by End of Evangelion. Is that's a choice that makes sense for him, and we hope by the end of the series that we understand the characters enough to understand why the choices made sense for them, the things they wanted. And someone else asked that why. Oh, sorry. There's like now I realize there's four separate conversations. I'm trying to. Yeah, I know. That don't alleviate doesn't alleviate worry. Don't worry. Um, yeah. This is not humble brag. This is um, as to whether twitching streaming is stacking up to my expectations. Once I get this working the way I want, I think so. The way everyone has participated, and that's what I wanted. But let's be honest, I could feel this. I could feel the airtime anyway, because I don't know how to shut up. Yes, the highest thing rated on Mal is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and the thing with Mal ratings, I might even still make this. I feel like I should make a whole video about how to interpret Mal ratings, because a lot of what pushes you up is not being something people hate rather than being the best. Um, and there is definitely a survivorship bias to how sequels tend to be rated in relation to their original. Because the only people who watch a sequel of a series and are therefore voting were people who liked the original enough to vote. So you've actually self-selected a more favorable audience every time you iterate, right? On top of that, you can go ahead and add points back to anything that has CG, because people will review bomb anything that, oh, that has CG. It's obviously garbage, which is another little idiosyncrasy of the anime communities. Um, but while I don't give ratings, I'm not interested in comparing them. And over the course of doing this channel, after just adopting that as being the way I would do things, after more thought personally, that's just now how I view things entirely. I'm like, actually, this is better. I don't gain anything from choosing a winner, but I do lose something from choosing a loser. Huh. Maybe I should stop that. But Mal ratings as an aggregate still can show some useful trends, right? Probably nothing on the 6 and below list that's going to blow my hair back, at least as far as execution. Probably nothing on the 9+ list that I'm going to wonder why anyone liked, right? So the mass input of opinions, you shouldn't take a gospel necessarily, but it certainly gives you trends, I think. To me, something like Rotten Tomatoes is useful for that reason. If it's 90% plus on Rotten Tomatoes, I don't feel any risk about seeing it, because enough people agreed that it did things well that I am probably going to get a lot out of it. Conversely, something is way down there, it probably has some fundamental problems that may detract. And so maybe I catch that one later. In the middle, a little bit more squirrely. For the extreme ends, I think the trends are actually helpful. Not any one of us knows more than all of us, right? So, but to answer, how do I like Twitch streaming in general? This is actually, if you're worried about my health, and I appreciate it. I'm not trying to brush you aside like you're being silly. It's actually your empathy is appreciated. One of the things that will happen as I get this further refined, the amount of work necessary to generate a couple of hours worth of live stream content is a fraction of the work required to generate 2 hours of the scripted content. And it's not my intent to replace one with the other, but it does let me do more without killing myself. So that is the place I envision live stream will have, a way to do more without doing so much more from myself. Yeah, there's definitely a continuity for the instrumentality with different series. Yeah, and there's more than just those two. They're just very obvious since they're one's meant to reference the other. Yes, the only thing objective in fiction for similitude and internal consistency. Yes. So, gosh, this is a tangent. The thing I said I wasn't going to do. Here we are. I will work on being less of a liar. There's something called consensus reality, and it's basically just if we admit that we can't know anything for sure, that there is always some element of uncertainty, then you can't discard all knowledge and all ability to build off of understanding by saying, well, we can't really know, if you want to build off of it. So there's something called consensus reality. We simply agree that certain things are true about the universe because that lets us do work, okay? Beyond that, And so that's more of a science thing. But in like literary analysis and all that, there is kind of something similar. Consensus technique, maybe? Consensus terminology. There are things we recognize work in the communication of ideas between artist and audience. And so usually when people are talking about being objectively good or bad, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about a certain set of rules that critics have used because they notice the trends. They notice these things are effective, these things are less effective. And how well an artist uses the ones we know are effective becomes this quasi-data driven way to, or quasi-objective way to judge their effectiveness. I don't buy that as a final judgment, but when you are actually trying to create a work yourself, when you are the artist, knowing those rules and trying to follow them is effective, which means they do have some value. They're not just abstract concepts. But the fact that people can break the rules and still succeed tells you that they are not actual universal standards. It's just like, most of the time this works, and here's why. And most of the time this will help you more effectively tell your story, communicate your themes, paint your painting. There's definitely like a difference between technique and the content. You know what I'm saying? You can learn to paint perfect figures and then take that knowledge to go make abstract art, right? You didn't fail to learn the other thing. It actually increased your ability to communicate what you wanted to. So, but one thing you can look at is rule set inside universes, which is what Gotek is saying. Does it obey the rules it sets up? Here's another TV tropes for you, but there is a like reality except where noted, or unless where noted. Can't remember the phrasing they use. But basically, every time we enter into a new story, we assume it's going to be like our reality until the story tells us differently. And the story needs to tell us differently, and they need to do that early enough, or at least hint at it. So, we can assume certain things will work like our universe until said otherwise. But when they introduce those rules that are different, they need to stick to them. Because breaking them then breaks suspension of disbelief, takes people out of the story. And unless that is your actual goal, you could see that as an objective failure. So, yeah, I agree. Bravey Starlight also had a lot of crossover there. No, they're right. It is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. It is definitely impossible to be unbiased. That is one of the kind of an essential thing. If you, depending on how you're, okay, for me, that is an essential thing that makes art is that you can't divorce the human bias that went into it, and the human bias of the people who will interpret it. And there's something called, referred to as negative capability, which is when a writer seems particularly adept at building out and portraying things from the point of view of a character that is different from them, that's not autobiographical. And that is one of the things held up as a mark of a good writer. But even then, there's no such thing as perfect negative capability, because even when you try to put yourself in someone else's shoes, as imagining a character, or just in your own life, as hard as you try, what you're really still doing is putting yourself in what you imagine and believe it's like to be in that character's shoes, right? So you never can quite, the hand of the author never quite leaves the work, right? The fingerprints are always there. All right, so I'm going to skip down here. Important-ish? No, maybe not. Sorry, I really... Wow, chat's gotten way away from me. Hold on. Okay, yeah, talking about the sequel bump. That really depends on the series. I agree. There are a few series where it's very different, but you can often see, a series either was a follow-up sequel was either very bad or very different if it doesn't just naturally get a little bit better. Because it self-selects the audience. That's why if you go look through the Mal, actually you can do it right now if you want, but you go look through the Mal like top 50 or something, see how many of those are the second, third, fourth, fifth iteration of series compared to the very first series or standalone series. I think it'll be eye-opening if you've never actually looked at that before. Yeah, Mal can be like Rotten Tomatoes. It's not gospel. It gives you trends. It gives you things to... it helps you set your expectations, I guess. I think that is the actual value of review critics and scoring. It's not what I go in for, but no one has infinite time. And so people whose job is it to watch all this and give us what they think is a good measure of whether it's worth our time, that has a use, that has value, because our time is limited. But because it's so accessible, I think we typically treat that like it's more important than it is. That's really just a way for you to sort time. That's it. That's the purpose of that. Sometimes it's so you can sort out in your mind, but I think there's dubious value in that anyway, because you're choosing losers. You're choosing to make a judgment call about where this should be 3 on your list or 4, and maybe that helps you think about what you like in the series. That's fine, but when you do finally pick one as 4, did you now enjoy 3 more, or do you just like 4 less? I don't know. Yeah, audience scores and Rotten Tomatoes might be entertainment value. Yeah, a lot of people, that's a very surface reaction. So, am I twitching on stream? All right, sorry, I'm just trying to catch up to everybody here. Have we spoken about Evangelion as criticizing anime tropes, like kudere and tsundere? Kudere and tsundere. I have to stop and try to pronounce it. That's still not right. The funny thing about Asuka as criticism of tsundere, especially, is how she kind of helped form an idea of it. Like she kind of gave it a prominent place, right? Actually, I think she's probably partially responsible for it becoming, there being more of it. She's not the first by any means, but because I didn't live through it, and it's hard for me to say how widespread the understanding of those tropes and the expectation of those tropes existed before Evangelion, to say whether that was perhaps the intent. You can definitely read it that way. And again, even though I don't like that he does this, the director did, I think, say that the whole point of Evangelion was to criticize the otaku lifestyle. It's something just like that. Which, talking about YouTube premieres. Will you just send me more about that? Um, where we're talking? Um, yes, codify. That's the good word. In a way, Ray and Asuka codify those tropes. They're very visible examples that later examples are built off of. Um, so, you know, in language being descriptive rather than prescriptive, you can argue whether or not one is a pure example or not. But if that's how people come to what they associate with the term, then that becomes what the term means, right? Um, Someone mentioned Lucky Star, I think earlier, maybe yesterday, but Lucky Star has a whole bit where they talk about how the meaning of Tsundere advanced over time, and it's very meta because considering the uh, Haruhi actress being in there and them basically talking about her. But a word means what people have decided it means, you know. Um, and what's the opposite of kudere? It's a good question. Um, because people who are not cold or very warm um, usually are already affectionate, so they don't change when they become affectionate. Like, I don't know what that would look like. So, so much for 30 minutes this time. I know, I know. It's like, I'm just interested in this stuff. Um, yeah, I think that's a pretty good perspective when you go to rate, is to try to think about a taste list or a taste agnostic way of rating something. That if I was going to recommend to someone I didn't know, how would I rate it? I mean, there's some value in rating systems. I don't mean to poop on the idea entirely. I just mean, for me, that's immaterial to what I want to talk about in the first place. And and I feel a little bit validated every once in a while when some people are like, "Yeah, I didn't really like the series, but it was interesting to hear you talk about it." I'm like, "Thank you." um, that's I don't think how you feel about something doesn't have to enter into seeing what parts of it might be more interesting to take a closer lens to. Um, you mentioned Lucky Star. Yeah. I knew someone said it. Yeah, I would say another. Oops. Speaking more on the tsundere thing and prominent examples, I feel like Tosaka Rin from Fate Stay Nights probably a pretty another one that kind of helped codify it. That's early enough that, um, but it's not. They're definitely not the first examples. There's that you have to go back to like manga characters for the first really popular examples, and I don't have that off the top of my head since I'm not as familiar with manga. Um, Too invested for my own good. Yeah, someone else actually mentioned it. Yeah, Ren's a good example. Um, like she's arguably a much better example than Asuka, simply because of depending on which story you go through, how it ends up versus how Asuka and Shinji end up. Um, Someone mentioned Taiga. Taiga's definitely a much later example. The Taiga is almost like that's almost like the perfect encapsulation of the whole concept, I think. Um, yeah, and there's a lot of crap on it, but like people, they wouldn't keep making tsundere characters if people didn't like it. I mean, you know, freaking Leia from Star Wars is that. She and Han's relationship is that. That's how I explain the concept to people. It's like, have you ever seen Star Wars? Yeah, it's like that. It looks like they're like this, but they're not. One naturally leads into the other. So, uh, occasionally watch bad anime to appreciate the good. I mean, perspective is important. You know, the problem with like self-sorting or letting critics uh, pick everything for you is you do occasionally kind of lose when you only see the exceptional. The exceptional starts to seem less like the exception, right? Um, it amuses me. Well, it used to be when a fan base doesn't like how a story is being told or how it's being adapted, and some of the loudest critics here recently would be like Star Wars fan base, which I honestly am kind of ashamed of. And don't want to be counted on them, but and then very recently the Game of Thrones fan base. But it's always interesting to see these people who make a proclamation like, I could write a better script than this. We could get together and write a better script of this. And I'm always just thinking, nah, you couldn't. Nah. Uh, the fact that you say that means you've never tried, right? And the fact that you never try means you won't succeed. Um, sorry. But because they've only watched things that have gone through the whole vetting process and enough people believed in to produce and put money behind, means that they actually don't have a good sense of what even mediocre is anymore. And so the only thing that stands out to them are the few little things they don't like or think are flaws. And that becomes exaggerated in their mind relative to the actual merit of the work. So there's actually some probably advantage to just randomly watching stuff sometimes. Just get a little perspective. So, um, just exploded my mind with Leia. Yeah, I need to explain it one day, and I'm like, gosh, that's good. You could argue they're more of a slap slap kiss relationship since it comes from both ends. But that's an easier way. That's a fast way to explain the idea of someone goes from being so confrontational and aggressively pushing someone away to becoming very affectionate as their character arc. They are capable of that affection, but the aggressive side is what you see first. Uh, yeah, yeah. So Supersonic, you're saying the same thing always about Taiga. The Taiga is that's like the tsundere trope fully realized. That's the whole point of that whole story, almost, is to uh, do that. And of course, they brought in the best possible voice actress for it, and it's some of her best work. So um, is Taiga actually tsundere? Um, yeah, I think so. Just because she oscillates, but that her default state is to push back, to be violent even. Um, but we see early on she's capable of being affectionate, and we don't have to wonder about it. It's just which front she's showing at the moment. I think it's a good exploration of it, and the reason I said it's a good encapsulation, or someone else said encapsulation, but that's the right word, of the whole concept, is because she's not a one-note character, and you actually get to see each part of her advance and retract over the course of the story. So I think it makes it a lot more thing. Yes, trope codifier is basically what we're talking about. Yes. um, yeah, Taiga came too late to be influential, probably. I think she's more. Sorry. Taiga, I think, did come too late to be considered someone who influenced the track of Tsunra, except maybe to prove that there was still a market for that, till an appetite for it. But you can almost think of her as, depending on your opinion, me personally. Me personally, she looks like the end goal of all the few steps and advancements that that archetype went through in the other series. That if someone sat down and was like, how can we take this idea of character archetype and work it through to its logical conclusion, but make it a complex character and try to explore the reasons someone behaved this way and what it would take to get past that. I think that is probably Toradora in a nutshell. And so it's more like the evolution of Tsundere, if you want to give it a life cycle there, while it was still changing. Taiga might be the end of that. But it keeps going, yeah. I mean, yeah, Louise and Shauna are much more obvious examples of the Tsun Tsun side, right? All voiced by the same voice actress. Yeah, exactly. Most people who think they can write a good script would do it to have the things they want to happen, rather than the things that should happen based on what we understand about the characters and the universe. Something I've said before, but an ending should be inevitable in hindsight. It should almost be the only way it could happen. Like, that's actual good writing. And part of that is because then it's believable. Then it is actually relevant to our own reality, where people do things not randomly. They do things for reasons. Things happen for reasons. Sometimes ridiculous reasons. But there's always some cause. Still want to ask me about my viewing history? Go for it. Hit me up. I will tell you, I tend to remember things only in the name that they are distributed to English audiences. I made sure that was how I did it for my channel. So even though I know what all you are talking about when you refer to HNK, I'm always going to try to refer to it as Land of the Lustrous, and that's one less way to get confused for people. Like talking about yesterday, that it's easy to get like the anime community sometimes does itself no favors when it comes to bringing in new people, and I think obfuscating the name of something that someone might be looking for probably hurts. And I got no problem with people's efforts to be accurate, but for me in this position, it makes more sense to always use the same name for a series. I'm sorry, you're having trouble with the caps lock bot. Wow, you got the. So it got you just for capitalizing that many titles, huh? Oh, man. I wish I could refine that better. I can't even stop it from deleting all the other comments, which is pretty annoying. Tatami Galaxy. Okay. Watched like the first four, realized there's a lot going on. Let me watch this with a better... No, maybe first 5. There's a lot going on. Let me watch this with a fresher look. Haven't gotten back to it. Super ready to. Cooley Cooley, yes. Gunslinger Girl, yes. I think I've seen all of them. So is it Super Sensei? No. Wait. Oh, I thought I've stopped it from moving. Hold on. Oh yeah, Cooley Cooley. You're probably right. Makaku City Actors. I did Kiz Neighbor. Same deal. Got about halfway through. Fell in love with the opening immediately. Like that might be like one of my favorite things from that whole year of anime. But same deal. I'm like, oh, I should go back, and haven't. Devilman Crybaby, I started here recently. I took a break about the halfway point. And Ping Pong the Animation is something I've heard about so much that it's on my non-existent list, but I have not seen it at all. So, I have not seen White Album 2, although actually, like, it's on my queue. So yeah, I'll play with the caps lock purge, but yeah, because it does seem to be the one that's catching people the most. The problem is you can set up a couple rules in the bots. It's basically like total number and total percent, and it appears instead of prioritizing one or the other, it'll just hit you for either, which is not very helpful. Yeah, I'll agree. Toradora is much more accessible than the other two examples, Shauna and Zero, or even I'm blanking. The Butler series. You know what I'm talking about? Where Kugima plays Nagi. That's even less accessible. Tatami Galaxy is probably your favorite. Yeah, I mean 4 or 5 in, I'm like, wow, I need to sit down and watch this when I can really pay attention, because this is fascinating. And Kids Neighbor too. Like it's a shame for me to have not actually been caught up on that. What happened was I used to watch a lot of anime, and then I started doing this, and I don't have the time for it anymore, because there's always something else I could be doing towards this. As long as the backlog exists, there's only so much I can relax and just watch stuff for my own enjoyment. And so I have a lot of series just cut off in the middle. Ancient Magus Bride, yes, I love it. Like, I want more like that. I want more almost fairy tale-like presentations. I don't use Mal to keep track. No, I don't. I have a pretty good memory for that kind of thing. Kino's New Journey. The new Kino's Journey. You know, that's one of the ones I watched for when I did the big kind of survey videos I did right at the beginning. If you ever read the About page on the website, you see like the first year of my missteps to figure out how to do this, even as I am doing it. And that is one of the ones I watched for that. And I love the vibe so much that I watched a couple more of them. But I felt like it was the kind of thing I could just come to every once in a while and watch a single episode. And I didn't feel compelled to sit down and watch it all the way through. So I still, every once in a while, have watched one. So I'm not even sure how far I am. The queue will keep up with that. I'm not worried about that. But I just remember that it's like, I enjoy this kind of episodic thing. Have I read Book of the New Sun? Man, Book of the New Sun, the world building, holy cow. you want to talk about show don't tell. But there is, I think it's in the third book, maybe third way through, where our main perspective character, the way he started to behave, I found so off-putting that I stopped the series. I don't mean it to be stopped for all time. What happens, I stopped the series, I moved, it's still in storage somewhere, and I wasn't compelled to get it back out. But I want to, because the world building is unreal in that series. Yeah, Mega's Bride was incredible. I totally agree. I know we're doing subjective things here, but I don't mind saying when I think something's exemplary. I have not seen His or Her Circumstance, actually. Violet Evergarden I still have not watched, because it was going to be my choice and then Netflix got it. We did Darling instead, and I think I was bitter about that. And then after Darling, which was quite the run, I did watching 3 shows a week for shows, and then we did Casual Monday, which was me watching a lot of shows before we narrowed it down to about 6. And so I've just never had a chance to actually go back and watch it when I'm in the mood to watch it. But man, like I said, like I said yesterday, KyoAni used to be one of the studios I would always check out the things they did. So. All right, let's see. If I could, I would stay up. Yeah, I hate the need for sleep. I wish it was not unnecessary. Flip Flappers also. That was one that was like, this is just entertaining. I have to watch this. It's like at the end, I was like, wow, might have been better to go through this as an analysis style and try to figure what it meant episode at a time. But that's further than Universe. This is actually something I've talked about before. Haven't watched it yet, but I know I will. In all this time, I think I seem to have. When I was trying to pick the show that was Darling eventually won out that season. When I am looking for a series to analyze, I'm not looking for what I think is the best show, whatever I think that is. I'm not looking for the most entertaining or popular show. What I'm looking for is a show that from episode 1 I feel confident will have enough to talk about, that there will be plenty to discuss, and enough competence in that first episode that I feel confident in the showrunners, I feel confident in the creators, and can give them the benefit of the doubt, which is essential to the way I do analysis. So that season, and I've said this elsewhere, so it's on record, I didn't choose Darling in the Franxx because I thought it had the best first episode. The actual series I thought had the best first episode was Place Further Than the Universe. And so it's always been on I'll definitely go back and check that out. When I actually said that in the video where I did, which might have been last summer, I had a flood of comments from people like, you've got to check that out. So, haven't watched it, but I will. Makaku City Actor's only seen once. It's interesting you want to watch it again, because my experience at the end was like, this might not be a series with high rewatch value. That was my just at the end single take. Death Note and Code Geass for sure. Classics. Code Geass would be another one enough for them to talk about. Recommendations. Yes, okay. So, talking about one day addressing older shows. You know what we're doing with Evangelion right now? Not exactly in this format, certainly with me being more confident, but it occurred to me doing all this that a way to perhaps visit older shows without stopping what I'm trying to do with the long-form stuff on the YouTube channel would be to do them kind of like this, but not trying to rush, right? Like I know when people do rewatches of series, like anime communities will coordinate that. it's pretty typical to just do an episode a day, right? And it occurs to me that this is probably a good platform for that, for dealing with older shows. Where, and again, this kind of relies on the spoiler thing being pretty well enforced, and people being behaved on this. But I could definitely pick a series that I haven't seen, and everyone kind of wants to rewatch and go through it, I don't know, a couple hours at a time, an episode a night, and maybe not every night. Perhaps sometime after I fix this. That could actually be a way to talk about more of this stuff than we otherwise would be able to. So yeah, I actually I like Ella's comment that sometimes you have a very personal connection to shows that's hard for others to experience, and that makes it harder for you to know if it's going to be enjoyable. Yeah, man, that is a pitfall of recommendations right there. Because art is experienced internally and so subjective, because all of us are different, you sometimes don't know how universally approachable is this thing that I love, right? And contained within that is both the problem of reviews as a main focus, at least from where I stand, and the inherent subjectivity of the art-audience relationship, right? Yeah, I could pull up a lot of examples, honestly, just from me and the people around me, that I know would never be replicated. And makes storytelling such a personal thing. But it does get in the way of recommendations. That's why I think big mass input for rating systems therefore have value because of that, because you can see trends. Was Flip Flappers not successful? I caught it later, so I wasn't really sure. What show, new, classic, or already reviewed, do you feel like episode 1 gave you the best impression for having depth to analyze? Ooh. So the absolute fastest any of these series has caught me was the absolute fastest. I had to look at the timestamp. It's a tie, probably, between Made in Abyss and Drawing the Franks, because the moment that both of them hit that first opening little segment for Made in Abyss, it's where you get the underground river plays. There's just the montage of you seeing them getting Reg back. And for Drawing the Franks, it's where the title hit is. Both of those do so much in that first 5 or 6 minutes that it instantly made me think, this is probably going to be the winner. This is a good one for consideration. And then both of them delivered in the rest of that first episode. So that's probably the fastest. The Land of the Lustrous premiere was an astonishingly good premiere. There was definitely no chance I was going to choose anything else after that, because it has there's almost a complete character arc inside that first episode, and we so quickly get a sense of the characters and how they're capable of change. The structure of that first episode was so impressive. The structure's hard in serial things. So let's see. There's actually similar points like that. It's funny because Land of the Lustrous didn't have an early moment where I was just like, this is probably it. But by the end, there was no question. Where a lot of the other ones I've chosen had moments where I was like, you had my curiosity, now you have my attention. Another good example is Rayview Starlight, the scene where everyone starts introducing themselves to line up. is that was the moment I was like, there's definitely more going on to this than it appears at first, and it's like then it definitely had my attention. Bunny Girl Senpai was kind of like the soft choice for that season, and again, that first episode was like at the end of that, there's no way I would have chosen anything else because it showed everything I wanted in a series to talk more about, and reminded me of other. Of course, the fact that it reminded me of other series that I also think highly of helps. So. Of the ones I've chosen, Promise Neverland probably made the weakest first impression. There's nothing wrong with the way they decided to do it, but I didn't get the sense of depth to it from that first episode. That there was surface level, because the surface level stuff is kills, right? To be sure, but that's not enough for me to want to talk about something like this. So. And that's the ones I've chosen. Sorry. Past ones, man, I have to think about that. Nothing comes to mind immediately because I haven't had to choose them. I never had to choose between things. It's not something I like to do. I think you can probably tell. Do I take consideration of studio or directors? It definitely will cause me to make sure I pay attention to a first episode that I might not pay as close attention, like Sarazan Mai. Oh man, I'm saying that wrong. This last season would have been an example of that, where I would intentionally pay more attention, knowing who's behind it. But that doesn't actually figure into whether I choose it or not. The first episode. Think about this. It's not like it gets worse over time or better over time. It seems really random. Nobody gets that much benefit of the doubt. Okay, no one gets a free pass. That audition, that first episode, is what I'm looking for. Okay, good. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting people's reactions when I talked about working through old stuff. Yeah, that's really. I think it'd be fun. And we're doing it in a very abbreviated situation here, but you can see that I have way more to say than I can fit in time. He knew it was going to be Made in Abyss. Yeah, Made in Abyss made such an impression out of the gate. And the funny thing about it is, unlike Darling and unlike The Land of Lustrous, other examples that I chose, Made in Abyss, you're bought in before you even really have a sense of what it will be, which is kind of impressive in its own right. Book Libraries has a cult following. I think I'm glad to hear that, honestly. Yeah, a lot of people. Frank's was the first for a lot of reasons. I wasn't aware of it at the time I chose it, but the signal ratio. I mean, sorry, the signal boost that series got was kind of unreal in retrospect. How many people tuned into that, and it was a new thing. And I think just being prominent and being so flashy and having such an interesting female protagonist out of the gate, and then having controversy immediately almost, I think just made it something you couldn't ignore. And being an original story, no one knowing what happens is a very key element to the hype, the build around that, certainly the enjoyment I got to have of it, because everyone was trying to guess and try to figure things out in the chat each week, which you just don't have with the series ongoing, because people, when you know the whole story, how you look at each thing is different. And so Darling being an original that no one knew increased that we're all finding out together novelty. So that was, I mean, we're not going to replicate that experience very often, I think. Watch live on Twitch. Yeah, I wouldn't do a watch along anyway. I wouldn't. I'm not a. I'm very quite apart from Twitch's rules on it. Actually, despite its problems, I very much believe in copyright protection. I very much believe in fair use being a good exception applied correctly. My problem is when there's a mismatch in the power to enforce or make that decisions, because it feels too much like censorship. I'm very anti-censorship. And it's only a problem because there's a mismatch in their financial ability to fight me versus mine them. I would still fight them if it came down to it. Like, I'm always looking for a hill to die on, I guess. But I believe in both copyright protection and the exceptions to it. I think they're both important. And so I would never just play a thing on stream for you guys to see. I'm not ever going to watch a thing that's I'm never going to do a watch along of any kind that isn't a show that you can get legally, because I'm not trying to. I don't want to say, hey, let's watch this, but you're going to have to pirate it. I don't want to encourage that. What you yourself decide is up to you, but I'm not going to encourage it, and I'm not going to take part in it, because copyright protects me too. Did I ever look at the lyrics of the song in episode 1 of Frank's? Do you mean, Sorry, I know I'm way behind chat now. Will you tell me which one you mean? Oh, okay. Same so the same studio did Princess Principal as Flip Flappers? Oh. Okay, Princess Principal was, if I also enjoyed that, honestly, to put that out there. That was the same season as Made in Abyss, as I recall, and it would have, it was like the handful of shows I had in consideration. Truth is, 5 or 6 minutes into Made in Abyss, I knew it was going to win, but that would have been a backup. That would have been probably another one to consider. It also has a fantastic first episode. Fantastic world building, stakes, giving us a peek inside the main character. That's another example of a fantastic premiere. Wish more people look at the Hanabata videos. You know, I said this, but going back and getting all the links and remembering some of those videos, like, Hanabata raised some really interesting discussion points. And it's a shame it wasn't more of a thing. Like, you rarely see a sports anime as the medium to explore abandonment issues and mental problems like that. And it was surprisingly complex for that. And I feel like this is a situation where it was so different from what was expected of it that the backlash hurt it. But it was super interesting to talk about. I'm actually kind of proud of some of the couple of those videos in there. Yeah, we wouldn't watch it live. Yeah, you are saying the thing. Mind if I plug real quick? Yeah, no, it's okay. I know what you're doing, man. Go ahead. In general, fall 2018 was a banger. Yeah, that was a incredible season. Like, it was hard to believe. I can't believe I chose that moment to do more of a survey type of analysis. I'm not sure. I mean, 2018, I think in general was a good year. I'm not sure it's on the level of 2011, which was still kind of unbelievable, but recent memory for sure. I was like, what a good year. But fall especially was like, going into it, I didn't think much of it, and then there were 4 or 5 shows that I just thought these would be in running any year. Like, these are good shows no matter where you put them in time. Yeah, Promised Neverland didn't show you everything it was going to be in the first episode. I agree, but as a horror as a horror movie and encapsulated in a single episode on that level, I think that's pretty successful. That's enough to hook a lot of people in, but it wasn't enough to hook me to want to talk about it. But it didn't take long before it was more convincing. You just wish I'd chosen Dododo. Well, if I'd chosen Dododo, I probably wouldn't got knocked offline. But at the same time, I wouldn't be doing this. So, what are you gonna do? Dododo, I'm not caught up on. Just FYI, I'm halfway. Maybe not quite halfway. Oh, I'm loving every second of it though. Like, man, remind me to just never count Mappa out ever, right? When is the next episode of Land of the Lustrous? So I'll after all this, not today. We'll just talk about it next season. Um, yeah, Penguin Drum. You can now have to watch all Ikuhara stuff. Yeah, there are some directors like that I'm just like, whatever it is, I'm at least gonna make sure I check it out. Um, yeah, studios are not. I say that I'm going in broad terms when I say I need to check out anything Mappa does. Right, I used to watch everything the Shaft would do or KyoAni. Um, there's a lot of farming out. There's a lot of more not mercenary, but close enough. Directors and the creative director, whoever's in charge of art, whoever the lead artist is, whoever's in charge of storyboarding, especially, that make a bigger impact than who's actually producing it. Um, but some studios seem to care a lot more about their reputation than others. Like I like just not to mean to throw shade here, but like I like some of the stuff that JC staff puts out, but I also get the impression they don't care that much about how they're thought of, right? They're not like it's not a critical um, reputation they're worried about protecting. So let's see. Ichigo is the true protagonist of Franks. I mean, and I know a lot of y'all watch my thing. I was pretty high on Ichigo the whole time. I thought she was a great example of how the audience point of view changes how we interpret a character. Because if she was our point of view character, she would be. If we think of her as the voice of reason, the one keeping it all together, the one who's super capable, despite being so human and having these other insecurities. So it's surprising to me how hated she was in the wider audience. It makes me not that upset about not being a part of it, honestly. Is my plan to finish Land of Lustrous and then start a next season again? Not exactly, but we'll talk about it. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm reading your Symphogear shenanigans. Yeah, we talked about that, and you didn't tell me it was that serious. Holy cow! Well, that's all right. No, sorry. I'm not in real time to you, but yeah. See, that's the thing. Companies throw their weight around, but the truth is, like, you got a good argument here. As long as you're actually willing to fight it, you'll probably win. And most of the time, they don't even want to fight you because every time you win, you make it easier for the next person to win. You know? Because now there is actually some precedent somewhere about more and more specific use cases. And that's what really bothers me about copyright and fair use, the way it actually comes down, the way it actually. Um, yeah, Hanebadu, again, going back to that. View of mental health and how it affects athletes. Yeah, that was an interesting way to do sports that people don't normally do, and the stress of it. And we got a good chance to talk about a lot of that. So, um, Yeah, okay. I'm glad a lot of people really liked Hanabato. I mean, um, you never know what the whims of the greater audience will be. That's why I rather enjoyed tuning it all out. Um, no, okay, Go Tech. I'm catching up. Um, no, I actually don't know about that opening sing song. Um, nice. I'll have to check that out. Honestly, like Darling Franks, I could just start over and go back through that series. There's still so much to talk about. Um, Dotaro just ended, and I wrote an essay on it. Yes, I've been the receiving end of your essays, and I believe you, and I bet it's great too. Because wow, there's just the part I've seen. There's so much to talk about. Um, Mercenary directors, yeah, it's how I think of it. The boogie pop stuff I didn't keep up with actually. Um, just so that I got into the trenches of working on Promised Neverland, everything else got pushed aside. Um, so, Mordred, what you're saying about the way I've gotten out of sync versus what you're talking, yeah, it's a problem. Mostly it's because I don't answer it succinctly and ramble on. Um, there is a potential solution for this down the line. Um, it they're not used for anything yet, but everybody who's tuning in is earning points 10 minutes every 10 minutes, a point per minute. And one of the things I think might be useful down the line is to you can probably see down the panels. There's nothing there yet, but one of your options is to make a stream shop where you spend these virtual currency towards things. And I thought it might be useful to make one of those things a focus question or a focus topic or a interpretation someone wants to put forward. And they basically spend some of the time they've spent watching to elevate that to be the thing we're talking about at any given moment. I think slash points might tell you. I don't remember. Something like that, though. I mean, I can look at it, but there are chat commands for it, and I just haven't put them down because there's nothing there. There's nothing to spin it on yet. But that is one of the things I thought might be useful because then the people who actually, oh, look at that. There you go. And I should I should set that up to whisper. And yeah, chat's ahead and I'm behind. You're right. It's not not your imagination. Now I've got everybody doing the points thing, but at least you can kind of see what it is. Those are basically 1-to-1 for points, unless you have donated, in which case you have a little boost from that. I said I was going to try to figure out something to give people to donate because I can't really give you anything, but that seems like a pretty innocuous thing. It's such that you can't buy your way to the top unless you really spend money, which I'm not trying to encourage. But if you like came up, let's say it was like, I don't know what, let's just say 200 points to make your question the focus question for a second. I don't know. This is really like down the line when there's more people in chat, hopefully. It doesn't matter right now, but and you had like 190 or something, and that would be just a way to, anyway. Yeah, it should probably be a private message, but for the moment, like, I know not everyone's going to use it every time. At the moment, it's just like, what is this thing? Yeah, there's a couple ways to do it, a couple of overlays. I just haven't, I know. I know, it's pay to win, essentially, but I don't intend to make it ever inaccessible. To make it work, you have to do it with your name specifically. Probably. But I actually think, I'll have to look. I think you can actually do it 2 different ways, but it may not say that on that page. I haven't actually worried about it yet because yeah, you're true. Every time it happens, other people will join in and be curious. Sync only if we input the user for donations. Maybe I'll have to check it out. I can do that because I can go look at the anonymous ones and try to link it back. So I'll get an answer for you on that. However, I can also add it manually. It doesn't have to just be the bot. So I can actually fix it if necessary. So, yeah. So I'm not going. I don't have a whole bunch of things to offer right now. I want to figure out what is actually appropriate. Like a lot of people, just an example, a popular thing people will do is let you spend your points for a song request. So you could be the one change what's playing in the background. And it is a it's just it's a little thing to. I think the goal. I mean, well, okay, the goal is to inspire people to watch your channel. That's why they're called loyalty settings. But I think the way that you can give people who are there every day and participating and all that a little bit of perks for that is it's a nice thought. But figuring out how to do that in a way that doesn't disrupt and that would be worthwhile is, I don't know, take a minute to figure that out. Song requests is a good idea, but at the same time, we don't need music so loud that you can appreciate it, because then you can't hear what I'm saying. That makes a lot of sense for people who are gaming streamers, who only might occasionally talk, and you're mostly just watching them play, and that becomes the soundtrack to the game. It makes a lot more sense, I think, in that context. But here it might be disruptive. It's a good thought, but not every stream is the correct application. So, nearly on Reddit. Well, you came to that conclusion yourself. I wasn't going to point it out, but that's how I think of it. Oh, sorry. Like mechanics are quite ethical. We're doing loot boxes. No, nothing like that. Now, you do have the option to do like giveaways. Like people can put their name into like a giveaway or something. Like, I'm not going to do this, but let's just pretend, for example, that at the end of the whole stream, everyone could do a giveaway for this original copy of the original Death and Rebirth that doesn't even exist anymore. But that would be a way that the longer you'd watched and the more time you put in, and I guess to donate it to. That's why I kind of don't like that part. Then it would become this big raffle that you basically have spent your time watching to enter. And so a lot of people do that, and that's another interesting way of spinning that and encouraging people to stick around. And I don't want that to be such a good anything that you stick around for that reason. Hopefully it's for like all this discussion. Like that should be enough by itself, or I'm not doing my job at all, right? But if you're here every day, I also like the idea of having something fun to do. So, guess you're outside the country. Yeah, but I mean, I know I have an international audience, so I wouldn't do that unless I was ready to accept that. So, yeah, I mean, the soundtrack thing is something to figure out, because I like the idea in theory, but I'm worried about how it would interfere. The only thing I specified on the tracks we've been listening to here is that they don't have words, because then they're not interfering with the clarity of what I'm saying. My voice comes and goes anyway. Which is the whole reason you can probably hear there's a lot of compression on my voice. It's because I start really high at the beginning of a sentence and eventually trail off as all the oxygen leaves in my lungs, and I need probably speech lessons to not do that. But in a pinch, compression helps fixing that. But it still doesn't affect the total volume enough where music playing at the same time wouldn't occasionally override what I'm saying. It's kind of hard to listen to two sets of words at the same time. So. What are you, EA? Yeah, I mean, that's not what I want to do. I know people aren't here for the points now, but I didn't want that to be because I just now bring it up. But if that's make or break between you wanting to watch, then I've failed. That's how I feel about it. At the same time, I like the concept, in theory, of something fun like that. Some little thing, because I know y'all have side conversations while I'm doing this, and so I don't want it to be a situation where everyone's playing lots of chat games and all that kind of stuff. I have all that turned off, but um, if I could find something of real value, the only thing I've thought of that I really like is that idea of spending points to make a float a certain question or a theme to be the thing we're talking about that moment. I like that idea because then it becomes a real shared conversation. Someone's going to put that forward as something they actually care about. And you can't just roll up in here, first time viewer, and yours be the one that is chosen. But I also don't want to only be you have to pay to play and be a long-time person. So in theory, I would try to read from both. But I don't know yet. Not worried about it yet. But this gives a nice like base points for everyone's here that I can work with. So. I've missed half of the conversation here. Unless they donated a lot, yeah. You can't say anything unless you're new. Unless you've got money. No, I definitely don't want it to be the kind of thing that incentivizes someone to spend money for that reason. Yeah, I'm pretty uncomfortable with that as a concept in the first place. I'm missing what you are talking about back and forth. I missed the series. Whether it's a calculated strategy, whether they intentionally keep re-releasing different versions. I know sometimes it's just like licensing is a thing. Like license agreements that seemed like a great idea at the time, but come to be regretted by one party or the other. And sometimes re-releases help you can free you from that. But definitely, it's a way to keep the entire universe of a story in people's minds without having to reinvent the whole story or face the humiliation of trying to tell a new story and failing. I definitely think some decisions have been made from that point of view. Yeah, only 30 minutes this time. Sorry. Actually, we'll wrap it up since we have stopped talking about Evangelion. But because this Twitch stream is new to some people, and me especially, this feels productive. Yeah, I think a lot of parents accidentally rated their kids Ninja Scroll back in the 90s. I can attest to that, yes. And it's about to go back to yesterday, talking about how they mix every type of anime together, and that also hurts the accessibility to it because you'll have Ninja Scroll alongside something wholesome like, I don't know, Castle in the Sky. I feel like is that something I watched around the same time. So this kind of open conversation is exactly what Discord would enable. Yeah, I mean, the argument for Discord, where people can talk about this all the time, is a good one, and that the point is to bring people with a similar. Like I accept your argument that to bring people with a certain shared interest, or I guess in the case of my channel, a shared temperament, maybe. And give them a place where they can hang out with people who are the same way. So you could discuss all these different anime with people you are reasonably sure are not going to immediately turn it into some kind of your taste is garbage, that's trash anime My wife is the best, right? Um, but you know, I don't think the critical mass exists yet. But we're definitely going to work on it. I haven't seen if you've hit me back yet. So good night, those leaving. Um, thank you. Yes, I know I ran late again. Um, you those of you over in the later time zones are some real troopers. I apologize. So yeah, the EU and licensing issues. I'm sorry that I have to default to American copyright things. That is what I'm subject to, and it is also the biggest portion of the audience. So really, there's no other criteria that makes sense. But I know that um, excludes some people sometimes, and I wish it wasn't so. Um, there's no international copyright standard. Um, I think it is at least somewhat fortunate that the dominance of US media helped their copyright laws gain a lot of precedence. Um, because in general, they are actually pretty logical. They're actually pretty well laid out and has ancient. They inherit some of it definitely from British common law, but some 19th century decisions that, especially for fair use, are still kind of what we go back to when we're trying to consider that. And thanks to America being something of the world's entertainers, that has influenced other copyrights, but not always. And it's a shame. Not to say that's perfect, but like, you don't want the anarchy that you might get in. Oh, I don't know. I guess China is kind of famous for it right now, but you don't want that either because that just hurts artists' ability to be artists professionally, to make more stuff for us. Um, and I know the EU's having their own growing pains with the internet right now and the copyrights. I know. Um, only 3 hours this time. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Now, don't be wrong. Like how long copyright lasts sometimes is stifling. But the base concept is more what I'm talking about. The base idea of control, um, but with built-in exceptions. Um, Post-stream rambles are amazing. Well, they're rambles for sure. Um, yeah, you can probably tell, guys. I've wanted this as an outlet. I guess I've wanted to do this, and it's been impossible on the platform I've been on to this point. Yeah, sorry, we went to overtime quite a bit here. Um, yeah, sorry, I agree. The main problem with copyright might be the length. Um, this unfortunately will stray too much into politics to address fully, and so I don't want to quite dive into that. But I've said it elsewhere, but to me, copyright should be a shield, not a bludgeon. Um, and after a certain point, protection becomes somewhat aggressive. That it no longer works. Now, copyright and trademark are different things and should be, and they should be treated the same. I'm not treated the same. They should have different application. Trademark makes sense that you can keep it up so long as it's important, as long as it has value to you as a company or a brand or whatever it is, and that you can lose it if you do not protect it, right? Um, that built-in expiration when it no longer matters that you have control is a concept I wish copyright itself adopted more, because that just makes sense from a public good point of view, you know? So, yeah, okay. Yeah, I appreciate you. Mer- Maritesh? Maritesh? Is that how you want me to say that? Yeah, I appreciate you pointing out the problem there. I know the EU is having a problem with this. Yeah, Disney makes a convenient boogeyman uh, for this, and their the size of their voice is important to the debate. And um, Disney's kind of an interesting. Well, let's not go down this road. It's so interesting that Disney, the side of Disney that is run as a business, and the type of content they largely produce is an interesting duality, isn't it? Um, now, if you've ever been to any of their theme parks, but like their attention to detail is, well, it's a reason that like hospitality majors go there to learn. Like, um, but yeah, I think it's interesting that the two can coexist. What people see is a, at least in contrast to, and maybe no company could actually be as wholesome as the stuff they actually put out because that's not reality. But it's a, in their case, it seems especially pronounced. So. Oh yes, the stuff about Shield Hero. Yeah, that's again like I know I'd upset some people, and still like has nothing to do with the show itself. Um, I got an alert from something. I don't know what it is. Oh, yeah, yeah. It's on the computer is it was Discord. Yeah, I wasn't expecting it. That's why I had no idea it was feeding in. Um, is the computer is doing the audio processing is the one I do all the editing on, and it's like way over there, and because it's the best computer and it can do this kind of thing faster. Because some of these filters are pretty demanding. Like that's me turning off the noise reduction. You hear that? I'm sure you do. That's the AC that's like 4 feet away, running full blast because this is a converted garage. It's not part of central air, but it basically reduces it down to nothing. That one's super demanding. None of these other computers can handle it. Uh, but yeah, I didn't. It shouldn't pick up anything that's not actually going through Audible, but it did. So, no one more thing to fix. Yeah, noise reductions. That's the reason I um, am willing to put up with this restart thing over and over again. Yeah, that's not the only thing. I mean, the compression works too. Hold on, I'll show you. That's the noise reduction off, and then turning the dynamics off. You can see how my voice gets buried by it. So it's a very big difference. You thought it was your Discord? Yeah. I wasn't expecting to hear it myself because these are noise canceling, so that I can't hear it. I don't hear it externally either. I only hear what's coming through the mixer. And so I was very shocked. I was like, where did that come from? I was like, the Discord's not even on this computer. What am I? Well, you can understand my surprise then, yeah. Uh, something about Shield Hero. Yeah, so I don't want to get into it because I don't want people to get upset about it. But it was a comment I made about I didn't. Shield Hero made some decisions in the first few episodes that made me feel like I wasn't the target audience, and it's a little bit of meta commentary. It actually has very little to do with the quality of the show. Um, what is that filter? That's the adaptive noise reduction from Audible. Um, that's fantastic, but it is super demanding on a computer. So I have to run it across the room and back again. Read it. Okay. Well, let's not talk about the Land of the Lustrous manga. Land of the Lustrous, another one where I started off and didn't know I was getting into an incomplete story. I really wish there was like we need a flag for that. Like every single streamer, every single thing that sorts, that should be built in. Because I mean, I can't be the only person who doesn't like to watch a story and then just have it leave off, and it be continued in the manga and may never come back to the medium I prefer to take it in. I don't know that I would never want to watch something that isn't finished, but like it would be nice to know that going in without having to read the production history and the notes about every single thing, because that will tend to spoil you also. Yeah, well, there is for adaptations, but you don't know if it finishes, if the adaptation itself is complete, and if it completely adapts the entirety. So, yeah, I mean, at least there are some we know are continuing. We know Made in Abyss is going to get the movie that continues, that does I guess, the whole next arc, probably in one go. Um, there's the Buddy Girl Senpai movie that I know people have talked about, that we'll just see if I get a hold of that or not. And then Promised Neverland is going to be continued as well. What else have we talked about? You know, another great thing about Drawing the Franxx, as a subject matter, was that it completed. That's it. They're not telling that story again. They're not going to add sequels onto that, I hope. You can't... You shouldn't change that. It's not going to be better. Yes, that is the advantage of choosing originals, and I wish there were more originals, because originals almost always are going to try to end. They're going to try to tell it in one go. It's in addition, something I talked about yesterday, but in addition to the different set of tropes that Eastern storytelling favors over what I was used to, one of the things that really pulled me into anime was how often they were going to just tell just the story they need to tell and not try to continue it forever. Obviously, anime has some famous exceptions to that, but used to, certainly American TV, where every show seems to be trying to do things to get your ratings up and to see how many seasons they can tack on. How long can we take this and milk it? And, oh man, how refreshing it was to come over to anime land where they know exactly how many episodes they're going to make at the beginning and can tell the story appropriately. And a lot of them, when they get to the end of the story, that's it. Story's over. Now that, like, HBO and other, this golden age of television has come about, we're actually starting to get more of that, where they actually know exactly how much space they have to tell the story. And so now we actually have that kind of quality on the regular. But for a while there, like, anime was super refreshing in that respect. Yeah. Yeah, I know. The big three are a perfect example. The exception that proves the rule. Um, yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a selling point for anime to me. Um, so yeah, and the torch has been passed as far as the ongoing. Uh, thing. It's a shame that there's a shame that this commercial pressure and the reality of production must necessarily dip into the artistic process, right? It is one of the things that makes writing such a unique medium amongst the mediums, because the only thing you need to make a book is time. There's no cost beyond that. I mean, you have to write it down, but you know what I mean. Time is it. There's no release window. There's no scheduled release date that has to be met. There's no cutting out things because of budget constraints or because an actor is in a contract dispute. You get to tell what you want to say without any of that encroaching. And I think that manga probably also has that advantage. It's got a little more few people in it, but in a similar way to writing, it is not as constrained by the realities, by the unfortunate realities. So, have I eaten anything? No, but I intermittent fast, so it's no big deal. Only long time shown experience is Dragon Ball Z. I mean, as they go, it's a good choice. I mean, it has clear arcs, right? Which some of them just seem to add arcs for the sake of arcs. I don't know where it is now. Like, I know there's more of it, but as far as like some of those original runs, it's a big story, and it's not paced necessarily well. That's like, let's get a different conversation. But as far as like something that seems to go forever, that is not just milking it as far as possible. Yeah, Made in Abyss picked a good place to leave off to finish that arc, and especially to use that arc to end on. But they still ended up needing a double episode for the finale to do that. It was pretty clever. I mean, it caught me off guard for sure, to put so much of that story inside that single final episode. Very effective. Arcs for the sake of arcs, yeah, Bleach is definitely guilty of that. That's why I think Dragon Ball Z might be a better example of long arcs, but they don't feel superfluous, you know? What I think about people that speak about anime. Do I watch any YouTubers? When I was researching this, I checked out several AniTubers that existed at the time, and enough to decide if this was a good idea or not. At the time, but once I started doing this, no, not really. I'm not sure I've watched. I've seen a couple of things that Giga, is that how you say his name? But you know what I mean. I've watched just a couple of his things, purely because they are easily to digest, right? And he's doing a totally different thing than me, so. But I am totally checked out from everyone else, and I don't mean that that's not meant to be disrespect. One, I don't know if I'm going to be spoiled by doing that. Two, I didn't want to do it anyway until I kind of figured out what my voice is, you know. And at this point, there's no time for it. So even if I was caught up and wasn't as afraid of spoilers, I mean, I eventually will, but. Yeah. Dragon Ball Z Kai for rewatches makes sense because that pacing thing. Yeah, so you're talking about the Darling manga, which I haven't known, but I kind of like hearing this diverged. It may have been, maybe it was you. Someone definitely like updated me on how it was doing some things I said I'd wished I'd seen more of in the original, that the manga is actually doing some of those things. So it sounds like they are. It sounds like instead of trying to just extend the story or add on to the story, they're trying to reimagine the story. That's just the impression I get. So tell me if I'm wrong because I haven't read it. But I think if you are going to retell something, a story that's already contained, that's the way to do it. To tell something new. Um, so yeah, so that's interesting to hear. All right, I probably should call it soon, huh? Any last any last questions? Any burning thing? Anything I missed and all that that you still want an answer to? Because I need to get ready for the show tomorrow, for one thing. Though I should probably eat. What am I going to eat? It's a great question. I have eggs. That's about it. Uh, oh, did I say? Have I seen Kiso? I don't think so. Does it have a different name? Thanks, guys. Always with the high school DxD. I mean, I'm just. I'll let the mystery continue. Not really. I probably not then. It seems familiar, so maybe it's one of those things I've added to my queue because someone's recommended it, but I haven't gotten around to it. There's a couple hundred of those probably, but last questions or best girl? I don't get into that debate. How would you introduce Made in Abyss to semi-normie friends? This is a whole other tangent, so I won't go totally into it, but it relates to something I talked about in the long one yesterday, which is the problem with expanding the anime audience. And I think there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. I think you have to figure out why someone isn't already into anime, and whatever the hang-up is there, and suit your recommendation to that, right? So if it's simply that they have the wrong impression of it, you find something that changes that impression. If they're weirded out by things like what they, nudity or provocative things in animation, you don't choose things like that. If they can't get to the silly stuff and kinky girls and anything like that, you avoid that. If they absolutely refuse to do subtitles, you find a good dub. I don't think there's a good one-size-fits-all for that. I think you have to get past whatever it is whatever has kept them from already being into it. Because there's enough out there that hard for me to believe there's nothing someone won't like. So, yeah, curation. You're welcome, guys. Thanks for doing all this, all the feedback, all the questions, all the interesting conversation. As we go along, this will get a little more thing. You're welcome. It's something it's something I've had to figure out how to do to get people in, but I've spread the poison to 4 people for sure who are now pretty like regular seasonal viewers, so it works. I'm all in tomorrow. Yeah, this is day 3 of 9 in a row, going all the way through Evangelion. So thank you for your time. Really, I'll hit you back here in a minute after I eat. I really am going to do that first. All right. I am on tomorrow. I should have the schedule on the. You can see the schedule actually going across the top wherever you are, and it's about to come up. Good times. So it's showing June today, 24th today, the times, and then the next thing will be tomorrow's times. So whichever time zone is closer to you and easier to figure out will tell you. So have a breathtaking. You have a breathtaking day. Oh man, you want to talk about someone I'd love to meet? All right, guys, I'm going to get out of here. I will see you all tomorrow. Oh no, I always forget you can clip this stuff. Oh, all right. How could you not see it? You couldn't avoid it. Even people like who people were like asking me like what's why the sudden. I sit down and explain the whole thing. All right, guys. As soon as I find my stream ending screen, I'm out of here. I'll see some of you tomorrow. Hope this is worth all this time. I'm sorry for the people who are on the other side of the world where this is very late, but have a good night. Thanks for everything.